How to think like a wolf in a world full of sheep, Machiavelli. There's a question you've probably felt before, even if you've never said it out loud. Why do the people who play fair so often lose, while those who deceive, manipulate, and dominate seem to win? It's a question that lives under the surface of society's polished rules. You hear it in the silence after betrayal. You see it in the frustration of the honest person passed over while the cunning rise. And you feel it viscerally when you realize that being good doesn't mean being safe. In fact, in a world full of sheep, being good might just get you eaten. That's exactly what Niccolo Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. And what he taught us wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. He didn't write The Prince to turn people into monsters. He wrote it to expose the game most people are too afraid to admit exists. He knew that the world doesn't reward virtue unless it's packaged with power. That being moral without being strategic makes you vulnerable. And that if you want to survive, if you want to thrive, you can't just think like a lamb. You have to learn to think like a wolf. But let's be real. Most of us were raised to be sheep. We're trained from childhood to follow rules, play nice, wait our turn, and avoid conflict. We're conditioned to believe that if we just work hard and stay good, life will reward us. But that's not how power works. Power doesn't respond to goodness. It responds to awareness, to positioning, to perception. And the wolf understands this instinctively. The wolf doesn't waste time appealing to fairness. It studies terrain. It reads movement. It watches when others are sleeping. And when the moment is right, it acts decisively, without apology.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, here's the twist most people miss. Being a wolf doesn't mean being evil. It means being awake. It means seeing what others refuse to see. It means knowing that behind every smile there could be a strategy. That behind every law there's a loophole. That behind every promise there may be a calculation. The wolf doesn't assume the world is kind, but that doesn't make it cruel. It makes it prepared. And Machiavelli would argue that's the only intelligent way to live. Let's take a breath here, because I know what you might be thinking. Isn't this just cynical? Isn't this the kind of thinking that leads to corruption? And the answer is no, unless you let it. What Machiavelli wanted was not for you to betray your values, but for you to realize that values without power are like wings without air. Beautiful, but useless. You can keep your empathy. You can stay kind. But if you want to make a difference in this world, you better learn how the game is really played, or someone else will play it for you. So how do we begin to think like a wolf? First, we stop assuming people are always who they appear to be. The sheep takes words at face value. The wolf listens for what's not being said. Pay attention to patterns, intentions, power dynamics. Ask yourself, what does this person stand to gain by telling me this? What are they not saying? What's the real motive underneath the mask? Most people never ask these questions, and that's why they're predictable, easy prey. Second, we learn to move in silence. The sheep announces its plans. It seeks validation. It looks for permission. The wolf plots in the shadows. It studies every variable. It prepares before it pounces. Machiavelli said, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must be both a fox to recognize traps and a lion to scare off wolves." In other words, you have to be strategic and strong, thoughtful and bold. You must learn to calculate before you care. Third, you must accept this uncomfortable truth. In a world where many people weaponize kindness, your survival depends on discernment. Not everyone deserves your trust. Not every relationship is built on loyalty. Not every offer is sincere. And the moment you forget this, the moment you start believing that everyone plays by the same moral code, you become a target. Why do you think betrayal hurts so much? Because it catches the sheep off guard, but the wolf is never surprised. Let's pause and ask something real. Would you rather be loved for being harmless or respected for being sovereign? That's the root of Machiavellian thought, not manipulation for its own sake, but power with purpose. The wolf doesn't dominate for ego. It leads because it must. It protects its pack. It commands its territory. It doesn't bark, it acts. And that's what we must learn to do in our own lives. Because whether you're building a business, navigating relationships, or simply existing in a world full of competing agendas, one truth remains. Those who think like sheep are always at the mercy of those who think like wolves. And if you want to stop being controlled, you must stop being naive. Start asking deeper questions. Start noticing the structure beneath the surface. Start realizing that behind every system, there's a strategy, and behind every strategy, a human will. If you don't shape yours, someone else will shape it for you. This isn't about becoming ruthless. It's about becoming real. And once you see that, once you start thinking like a wolf, you can finally stop living in fear of the forest. You'll realize you were never the prey, you just forgot you had teeth. The predator's mind, how strategic thinking protects the soul in a world that exploits the naive. There's a myth that we've all been fed, one that's so deeply embedded in our collective psyche, most of us never question it. The myth is this, that goodness and innocence are the same thing. That the purest people are the ones who never think strategically, who never question motives, who never prepare for betrayal. But Machiavelli would have laughed at this. He saw it for what it was, a beautiful lie. Because in reality, innocence without awareness is not virtue, it's vulnerability. And in a world full of competing agendas, emotional manipulation and hidden power plays, that kind of innocence is a liability. It's not the soul that's at risk, it's the person who refuses to protect it. Let's get one thing straight. Strategic thinking is not the opposite of goodness. It's the guardian of it. You cannot preserve your values, your vision, or your voice in a world that's constantly trying to shape you unless you learn to anticipate how that world operates. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that a ruler must learn how not to be good when necessary. Not because they should become wicked, but because the wicked don't wait for permission. They act. They pray. And if you're not ready, they will use your morality as a weapon against you. Your kindness will be exploited. Your trust will be twisted. Your silence will be taken as consent. So let's ask a hard question. How many times in your life have you been taken advantage of, not because you were bad, but because you were predictable? Because you assumed others would treat you the way you treated them. This is where the predator's mind becomes essential, not to harm, but to read. To see through deception. To anticipate betrayal. To move with precision, not delusion. The predator does not attack for pleasure. It attacks with purpose. It watches. It waits. It knows the difference between appearance and reality, between what people say and what they intend. This is the mindset Machiavelli wanted us to develop. Not to become cruel, but to become clear. And clarity is the most compassionate thing you can give yourself. Because once you see things as they are, not as you wish they were, you finally have the power to respond intelligently. You stop giving your energy to people who drain you. You stop negotiating with those who never intended to be fair. You stop trying to convince others of your worth and start embodying it. But here's the paradox. The more you think like a predator, the less you'll need to act like one. Why? Because you'll no longer walk into traps. You'll no longer attract users, manipulators, or abusers. You'll radiate something different, something wolves recognize in each other. Presence. That quiet, controlled awareness that says, I see everything. I miss nothing. I'm not afraid of you, but I'm not naive either. And that's the moment you stop being food in someone else's game. You become a player in your own. Let's break it down practically. Strategic thinking means you stop revealing your plans to people who haven't earned your trust. It means you stop over-explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. It means you learn to observe first, speak second. It means you ask questions like, what is this person's incentive? What do they stand to gain or lose? What's their track record, not just their words, but their patterns? Most people trust based on feelings. The wolf trusts based on evidence. And that's what keeps it alive. But don't mistake this for coldness. This is discipline, emotional discipline, mental discipline, spiritual discipline. It's about mastering your own reactions so no one else can use them against you. It's about knowing your own shadow so no one can manipulate it. It's about becoming so psychologically self-aware that you can walk into any room, any deal, any relationship and stay rooted in yourself no matter what storms surround you. Machiavelli wasn't asking us to abandon our soul. He was asking us to defend it, to stop being casualties of our own unconsciousness, to realize that those who think strategically are not heartless, they're just tired of being broken. And maybe that's you. Maybe you've been burned enough times to finally say, I'm done playing nice in a game that rewards clarity. Maybe you're ready to become a wolf, not to become cruel, but to become whole. Because when you stop thinking like prey, you stop attracting predators. And when you start thinking like a predator with awareness, discernment, and control, you finally build the kind of life where your goodness is no longer your weakness. It becomes your legacy. The art of silent power, why wolves move in silence and strike without warning. There's a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't post every step on social media or explain itself to people who don't understand. It just moves. Quietly. Strategically. Lethally. That's the power of the wolf. And it's one of the most misunderstood forms of strength in the modern world. Because today, we live in an age addicted to noise, everyone broadcasting their intentions, their plans, their opinions, like a desperate signal flare trying to prove, I exist, I matter, I'm winning. But the wolf doesn't need to prove. It only needs to prepare. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He taught that those who truly understand power don't waste it on unnecessary displays. They hold it, guard it, conceal it. Because the more people know about your next move, your vulnerabilities, your strategy, the easier it is to stop you. The wolf's silence is not weakness. It is camouflage. It's the quiet before precision. And that's why it's so deadly. You never see it coming. One moment, things are calm. The next, the wolf has already moved, already struck, already vanished. Now ask yourself, how often do you give away your power just by speaking too soon? How many of your goals have collapsed because you told the wrong people too early? That's the trap of the sheep. They're loud. Loud with ideas, loud with emotions, loud with assumptions. But noise doesn't equal strength. It's often a mask for insecurity. Because when you're truly confident, you don't need to explain. You execute. And that's what silent power is all about. Let's be honest, how many times have you announced a dream, only to feel it lose its energy the moment it left your mouth? That's because when you speak prematurely, you invite interference, doubt, criticism, envy. And not everyone who listens wants to see you win. Some are just waiting for you to slip. They smile while you speak, but sharpen their knives in silence. This is why the wolf keeps its plans close. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need reassurance. It needs results. Machiavelli would argue that silence is not just a tactic, it's a philosophy, a way of life. Because the more you speak, the more predictable you become. And predictability is the death of power. The wolf is powerful because it is unreadable. You can't anticipate what you can't see. You can't block what you don't understand. And that's why the most dangerous people in the world are not the loudest, they're the ones who observe, who listen, who take notes while everyone else is talking. And when the time comes, they act without hesitation. But here's where it gets deep. Silent power also protects your peace. Because when you stop broadcasting your life, you stop giving people permission to interfere with it. You stop inviting unnecessary energy into your decisions. You stop living for validation and start living for impact. The wolf doesn't need to be seen to be effective. It doesn't need to be liked to be respected. It doesn't need to be loud to be lethal. This is where most people fail. They confuse transparency with authenticity. They think being open means being exposed. But the truth is, you can be real without being raw. You can be honest without being unguarded. You can be present without being predictable. The wolf knows this. It knows that the more you reveal, the more you risk. And in a world where information is power, privacy is protection. So, what does this look like in practice? It means moving in silence while you build. Let your success make the noise. It means watching carefully before you speak, so your words land with precision. It means observing patterns in people, not just their performances. It means keeping your emotional center intact, even when chaos surrounds you. And most of all, it means trusting yourself enough to not need applause for every step you take. Ask yourself, what power could I reclaim if I stopped explaining myself? What momentum could I build if I stopped broadcasting my every move? Because the truth is, not everyone deserves access to your process. Not everyone should know what you're dreaming of. Some things are sacred. Some goals must be protected in silence until they're strong enough to stand on their own. This is the art of silent power. The ability to move with intention, speak with restraint, and strike with precision. It is not about hiding, it's about honoring the process. The wolf is not invisible, it's just disciplined. And when you master that discipline, when you learn to control your presence, your narrative, your emotional energy, you become untouchable. And suddenly, the world no longer sees you coming. It only sees the impact you leave behind. The sovereign wolf, how to lead without permission and rule without a crown. There's a kind of leadership that doesn't wait for a title. It doesn't require applause or a certificate or someone else's blessing to begin. It rises from within quietly, steadily, undeniably. This is what I call the sovereign wolf, the one who leads not because the world gave them a throne, but because they became one. And Machiavelli, in all his brilliance, knew something most people still don't understand. True power doesn't come from authority. It comes from autonomy, from self-mastery, from being so rooted in your own vision, your own values, your own internal compass, that you no longer need permission to move. Most people are waiting for someone to notice them, waiting for the system to reward them, waiting for the gatekeepers to open the door. But the sovereign wolf doesn't wait. It doesn't ask, "Am I allowed?" It asks, "What must I build to make this real?" It doesn't beg for space. It carves it out. It doesn't follow trends. It creates them. Because it knows deeply that if you're always waiting for someone else to choose you, you'll never be free. And if you're not free, you're not leading. You're following someone else's map. And here's where it gets deep. Most people don't lead because they're afraid of being alone. But the sovereign wolf knows that solitude is not loneliness, it's clarity. And clarity is the birthplace of power. When you're not drowning in other people's expectations, you finally hear your own voice. You're not swayed by trends, likes, or opinions. You move from truth, from vision, from conviction. And that kind of leadership doesn't need a crowd. It creates one. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How much of your identity is built on being chosen by others? How much of your energy is spent proving your worth instead of building it from within? The sheep waits to be led. The wolf leads itself. And the sovereign wolf leads others by embodying what they haven't yet found in themselves. Courage, clarity, and calm. Not chaos. Not ego. Not noise. But stillness, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly where you're going, even if no one else sees the path yet. Machiavelli didn't write for kings who inherited crowns. He wrote for people who claimed them, who rose from nothing, who mastered the art of perception, timing, and decision-making so deeply that they became undeniable. And that's what we must learn to do, to stop waiting to be seen and instead become something worth seeing, to stop asking for validation and instead build something so real it speaks for itself. The sovereign wolf doesn't scream to be heard. It speaks once and everyone listens. It doesn't dominate, it orients. People follow not because they're forced to, but because they sense something rare, someone who doesn't need control to be powerful, someone who doesn't need to be feared to be respected, someone who walks alone not because they're isolated, but because they're aligned. So what does this mean for you? It means leading your life like no one is coming to save you, because they're not. It means taking radical ownership of your mind, your time, your focus. It means creating your own standards and refusing to shrink for anyone. It means knowing your worth so deeply that even silence becomes a statement. And it means refusing to be caged by systems, by opinions, by fear. Ask yourself, what would I build if I stopped waiting for someone to give me permission? Who could I become if I trusted that I already had what I was looking for? Because the truth is, no one is going to crown you sovereign. You must crown yourself, not through arrogance, but through action, not through noise, but through mastery, not through force, but through presence. This is how you think like a wolf in a world full of sheep. You lead yourself first. You build without asking. You watch in silence. You strike with precision. And you rise not because someone gave you power, but because you became it. No crown, no permission. Just the quiet certainty of a wolf who knows. This world belongs to those who dare to rule themselves.